There was a lot of talk before the Rings of Power began to air around the problem with the fact that the women dwarves in the show didn't have beards, when really they should have, but I think I finally found out why. Because Elrond and Durin are so gay together in this episode that I'm pretty sure Disa doesn't need a beard because she is the beard. Hello, interwebs! I am here to review the latest episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 7, The Eye, the penultimate episode of the season. Though, surprisingly, if you had told me that this was the season finale, I would have bought it, because there are certainly enough emotional catharsis moments and new storylines beginning and hints towards the future of this series in this episode that I was like, well, I have to wait another year and change for another set of episodes to come out. I would have been like, yeah, this is a great place to leave off all of these characters. But we have another episode next week, which has me kind of excited to see what's going to happen. But we do have a lot to talk about with this episode, and I have to say, this is perhaps the strongest episode of the show yet, and I am really feeling excited about the fact that I have been saying that more and more with every episode each week, because each episode has been better than the last. I have made no bones about the fact that I have had issues with some of the pacing and structure of this season as a whole, especially towards the front and middle of the series, and man, did that middle really drag. But I am very much excited about the fact that the last few episodes, especially last week and this week, have really started to pick up and show a lot of improvement, and I just really adore when a show can end its season on a strong note and actually show that it's building and getting better over episode to episode, because some series, like a lot of the Marvel MCU shows on Disney Plus, kind of start strong and then peter out, and then you kind of are left feeling with the kind of lackluster feeling about the show. That's kind of my feeling on things like Miss Marvel or Moon Knight. But when a show like begins kind of weaker but gets better and better and better as it goes, it leaves you with a really strong impression, and I've just become more and more, appreciative of the show. I still don't think it's a 10 out of 10 by any means. Like, I think there are still issues, and I will talk about some of the things that I take issue with in this episode, but I do think that there are a lot of things that this episode in particular capture about what I want from a Lord of the Rings series, and just begin to improve upon the best aspects of the show and start to remove a little bit, or kind of move away from some of the aspects of the show that I have not liked. But the biggest thing that I want to point out before I start going through each storyline that I most appreciated about this episode was it bringing a lot of Tolkien's poetry into this series. And when I say his poetry, they sometimes pull direct lines from his books, but I just mean that, like, ethos of there being a poetry to the world and the poetry to the way people speak to each other. In the first few episodes of this series, a lot of the characters kind of spoke very modern day-ish. There was even some sort of language that they used that sounded like people today would talk, and not a sort of Tolkien-esque sort of flowery language outside of maybe the elves. But here in this episode, we get so many really beautiful moments and lines that, again, I'm not 100% sure if they draw from the Tolkien's book or not, but if either way, they're just used really well. Just to draw our attention to some that I really loved. Durin at one point says to his father, "How do you expect me to move mountains, father, if you fall to pieces when I dig a single hole?" Like, that's a great line for a dwarf to have. It evokes their culture. It pulls from, like, what we know about dwarves, and yet there's, like, a poetry to it, and yet you fully understand it. We also get another really great moment between Galadriel and Theo, where she says to him, we don't call good deeds good, like saying, like, good, she kills orcs, because it sort of allows a place in our heart for evil to grow, and we have to fight that battle within and without. And also, when he's feeling guilt about having possibly led to Mount Doom going off at the end of last episode, she says, don't pick up that burden. You may find that you can't shrug it off. Or get rid of it. And it's like those lines are absolutely beautiful, and I think necessary when you're making a Lord of the Rings show, that I really felt was missing at the beginning of this series, and has really come back. It was started to come back in last episode a little bit with some of the Isildur Galadriel interactions, but here it was just all over the place, and I really appreciated that. The second thing that I want to point out, and I'll talk about some specifics when we get into each storyline, was the amount of times that the show underwrote a scene, and I mean that in a good way, because it allowed so many moments to land without a single word said between actors. There were a few scenes like that where either it was said or it was alluded to or sort of danced around in the dialogue of what was actually being spoken. And when you can do that as a writer and trust your actors, number one, and trust that you can allude to something without having to state to the audience like, hey, this character is now blind, like state that, it makes the scene more powerful. And I really just appreciated it. So again, is this show a 10 out of 10? No, there's still issues. I'll get to it in a second. But I am just seeing a vast improvement week upon week with this show that I'm honestly impressed with. Let's go in and break it down so I can actually talk about some of the specifics here. We'll start off, I'm looking at my notes here. Let us start off with the Harfoots, because that's the one that I probably have the most issue with, and then we'll go into some of the stuff that I thought was excellent. So we start off the beginning of the episode with the Harfoots finally arriving at the grove that they've been wanting to get to, and we see that the meteors from Mount Doom have landed where they usually end up at the end of their migration. I thought this was an interesting choice because it does tie the Harfoots into our main story proper, like the effects of one story hurt the other, even if they're not directly linked. I liked that. It was a good way to connect the two without them explicitly being connected, and does say that these shows are taking place within the same time period, and the effects of the bigger stuff affects just even the littlest of Harfoots. These big battles affect even the little people, and I like that sort of metaphorically as well. Then we get Meteor Man, the Stranger, whatever you want to call him, Gandalf, who's like tries to fix his tree, but then everyone gets scared of him when he seemingly causes the branch to break. This felt a little bit of a repetitious beat from episode prior, where it's like, yeah, we get it. They're kind of scared of him, and they sort of send him away because they don't like him being there, and they don't entirely trust him. And Sadak being kind of a jerk, saying like, this is the way that they lived, but no one's been there for as long as we know, so hope you don't die. This kind of shows how much of a dick he is, which will pay into a problem later on. All of that was a little bit repetitious, but I did enjoy some of it. However, I did like some of the other stuff where Nori, after the Stranger left and they sort of had their goodbyes, she said, this is all I'm going to be. I'm just a Harfoot. There's nothing I can really do. In that sense of like, yeah, we're just the small people. We can't really contribute to anything. Is kind of a repeated notion around Harfoot/hobbits in the Lord of the Rings, around that they can actually do a lot more than people think of them, or even they think of themselves, like Bilbo or Frodo in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books. Both were discounted for being hobbits, and I like seeing that put upon Nori herself, like she's dealing with that, and she can actually do more, as we eventually see. But then we see that the grove has all started to grow back, as we kind of figured would happen. So yes, the Meteor Man has some sort of actual nice positive powers again. Gandalf. And then they encounter what I am going to call the evil lesbian sex cult, because they're flamin'. See what I did there? No? Okay. Sorry. Anyways, they do run into these group of people that are seemingly looking for Meteor Man, and don't have the best intentions, considering they set the Harfoot's entire village on fire. So, yeah, dark people, not very good, not very good people, and we'll see what happens with that. But then this sets out the Harfoots to go and look after Meteor Man, and we get like a little mini fellowship. This scene, though, where they just chose to do that, did not really ring as true to me, because we have this Brandyfoot, the head of the family, I forget his name off the top of my head, sort of stand up and say, like, we are Harfoots, we stand up for each other, we stick with each other, that's what we do, don't despair. And that sort of sets them off to go after the Meteor Man. But I don't really buy that scene, because we have seen the Harfoots kind of be dicks the past 2 episodes. They're like, yeah, leave them on the trail, take their wheels. And I'm like, oof, this is dark. And so this moment where they like say like, we're Harfoots, we stick together. I'm like, do you though? Do you really? So that like payoff doesn't seem like it builds off of anything that the show's been telling me or showing me so far. So that moment doesn't ring as true. So that was probably the weakest of the storylines for me, but it does set up an interesting storyline where we have our Harfoots going after Meteor Man. But let us move to another storyline, which is the post Mount Doom exploding Southland storyline that we have here. And we have a few fractured storylines that I liked most of them. We do see some of our characters surviving at the beginning, and we get a little potentially fake out death with Isildur, where he sort of gets trapped underneath a building. Potential spoilers if you don't want any spoilers here. I mean, if you've seen Lord of the Rings, you already know this, but like, we kind of don't know that kind of know that Isildur didn't die, because he is in the beginning of Lord of the Rings. He's the one that throws the ring into, or does not throw the ring to Mount Doom, but cuts it off of Sauron's finger at the beginning of that movie, along with Elrond when he yells, "Destroy it!" that guy. So we know that he has to survive this, and so to have the one character that we have a sort of fake out death and still might be dead by the end of the episode, be the one character that we would know survives, is a little bit frustrating to me. And that is, as we see by the end of the episode, that is one thing that also bothers me with this, is that it's such a big moment last episode that I kind of wanted there to be some consequences, but all of our characters that we've been following so far all survived. Some with some more injuries than others, but they do all live in some way, shape, or form. So and then a lot of people pointed out at the end of last episode that like when that flow from the mountain, I cannot say the word, the phytoclasmic flow or whatever it's called, like hits you, it would kill you instantaneously. I'm willing to buy that Galadriel could survive that, and I'm willing to buy that I guess like people in Middle Earth are a little bit more heat resistant than most. I mean, Isildur, as we saw at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, was standing literally right above a huge pit of lava, which in the middle of a volcano in Lord of the Rings, and so I'd be like, well, he would be burnt to a crisp, I feel like, or deeply dehydrated at least. So, like, I guess people in Middle Earth are a little bit more fire resistant than most. But I would have liked some level of, like, someone dying. Just, you know, Bronwyn or Arondir. Just some consequences for that besides the one character we know can't die. Though I will like that Isildur is there with Adar at the end of the episode, because presumably that means they'll have some back and forth. And I think Isildur and Adar could be an interesting pairing and fleshing out Isildur as a character outside of the Númenóreans and his relationship with his father. So that will be an interesting pairing going forward. Speaking of Adar, though, I did really like the end of the episode. I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but might as well just stay where I landed. The end of the episode where they all sort of say like, "Hail Adar, King of the Southlands," and I was like, "No, we shouldn't call it that. It's longer that name." And the guy asked like, "What do you want to call it?" And I thought like, oh, are they really gonna have Adar say, "We're going to call it Mordor"? And I'm like, that feels like a bit beat you over the head, like look at the Easter egg sort of thing. But I did actually really like that they panned up and it changed the word Southlands to Mordor in the final minutes. I mean, we kind of already figured that at the end of from the end of last episode, but like doing it that way kind of removes a little bit of like distaste that I would have in my mouth if you just had the character turn to the camera essentially and be like, "We'll call it Mordor." It's like doing it that way is like having your cake and eating it too. You still get to have the moment of people going like, "Oh, it's the thing, it's the place, it's the evil place," without it being like put in the mouth of a character where I kind of cringe a little bit at it. So I did actually like how they handled that. You know, it's fan service, but in a fancy way. So I'll take it. I like to be serviced, just make it fancy. Had more sexual connotations than I intended. Moving on, we do go to Isildur, and I did really like his storyline here where he kind of has to let go of his son through this horse. Like we got this horse metaphor at the end of the last episode. The horse bonds to you, and the horse doesn't listen to anybody but Isildur because it was Isildur's horse, and Elendil has to sort of let it go. It was a very emotional moment, and again, I liked that it was never, like nothing was stated about that. Like no one said, "This is Isildur's horse." It was all told visually, like we saw the horse had the scar, so we recognized it, and then Isildur let him go, and you just see him crying. And it was not stated that he was letting go of his son in that moment, but it was shown to us emotionally through the actors and through the visuals of the horse. It was actually really, really great. That is strong writing that I really enjoy, that we get to see things without it being explicitly told to us that he's feeling upset about his son and letting his son go and like sort of carrying that weight, which will sort of probably push forward his arc into the next few episodes as we see him being sort of upset that his son died and now sort of turning on Galadriel here. So all of that worked great for me. Another good moment was when we see the queen has become blind, and she sort of states, she sort of says like, "Oh, we'll clear the fog," or whatever, and she says, "Oh, how long have we been out of the fog?" And they sort of realize that she's blind, and it's not explicitly stated. She's just like, "Keep going. Don't draw attention to it. This is just, we gotta keep people, feeling like they can get through this, and this will be a demoralizer." And so I really thought that was a strong episode, and it also pushes her arc forward, the queen's arc forward, as she's like, "We're coming back now. Fuck these people. We're gonna kill all these damn orcs. They made me blind. Oh, they're gonna regret that." Like you're like, all right, cool. Someone wants to get back at them. We also had a couple scenes between Galadriel and Theo. I already spoke mostly about that in terms of of some of the language and the poetry in Galadriel's language that I really enjoyed. We had a nice little tense sequence where the orcs almost see them, which is clearly evoking the ring wraith scene from Fellowship of the Ring, where the hobbits were sort of hiding underneath the road. We also get a nice little moment where Galadriel talks about her past and her brother and her husband. And I liked that because it gives us a taste of Galadriel outside of being a soldier. Outside of me, this person dead set on completing this mission, which I liked, and I think it comes a tad too late. I would have liked to see some of this more in the series. I think the only thing we got was like she loves riding a horse, but other than that, we haven't gotten much of her character beyond I'm a soldier dead set on stopping Sauron. So I would have liked some of this stuff to come out sooner, but it's a good scene nonetheless, and one that is much needed. So I did appreciate that. To wrap out this Numenor storyline, we do eventually get back to the camp, and we get the scenes where we, again, learn that everyone is alive. Bronwyn's alive, Arondir's alive, Halbrand is still alive, and again, just upset about the fact that, like, everyone survives. But it is interesting to me that the Queen's going to go back to Numenor, and Galadriel and Halbrand and Arondir are going to go back to the Elven homeland, because if my theory still holds up, that Halbrand is Sauron, which I still think it can be, because they said they found him like that, miles from where the volcano went off. So it's like, how could he have gotten that far with that big of a wound? Don't really trust that. So you're bringing Sauron back to the Elven home. That might be some bad stuff going down there. But still could be playing it straight. It might not actually be Sauron, but still running with that theory, and this would create some interesting tension with that. And also Galadriel going back when she should have been back home, as we saw in the first episode, so there'll also be some tension there. This brings me, though, to my favorite storyline of the episode, and that is Elrond, Disa, and Durin, and Durin Sr., I guess we'll call him, King Durin. All of this I loved because it was paid off by emotional moments between characters and a relationship that we had seen built up throughout the season so far that was the strongest relationship of the series. I like Elrond making an impassioned plea to the king, and not just doing it as an elf, but saying as a half-elven, sort of using his bi-species status, I guess, for lack of a better word, to point out the fact that, like, I know you don't love elves. They're not perfect people, obviously, but I can see that too, and sort of using that. That's why he makes a great ambassador, because he can negotiate through knowing what will speak to the king in that way, and using that, his heritage as, like, both half human, half elven, right? I believe that's what it is. He's half elven at the very least. I think worked very well. And then Durin pleading and saying, like, look, he's my friend. We should care about them. Like, you shouldn't just dismiss the elves. They're our allies. And Durin Sr. being like, no, we don't want to do this. And during the elder saying, no, look, fire embraces truth, like all things decay. And he's not entirely wrong, but, it's still a dick move to do to your ally. And Durin, I like Durin sort of counters with a personal thing, saying, like, look, you're making my friend die. He's drowning, and I can save him. And so I like that Durin makes it personal, while Durin Sr. makes it sort of a very just political sort of look at things. Moving on, though, we then get the great scene where, no words are said, but Elrond comes in, Durin looks at him, you see the sad face, and Elrond's like, all right, well, he accepts it. I'm going to go tell my people. And it's a great scene because not a word needs to be said, and it's all sold through the actors. We also get a wonderful scene with Disa and Durin right before that, too, where Disa's like, your father's got lice in his hair and everything, and he's like, don't do that, my father. Your mother, though. It's a fun little moment. I love Disa's fire. She's just like, yeah, screw your dad. We're going to do this thing. He's your friend. And I love that Disa's just so here for the Elrond-Durin relationship. She's like, my husband and his boyfriend are so adorable, and I love it so much. And I just adore Disa's, like, just joy at that. Especially when you see that the Mithril actually heals the tree, and it sort of, like, inspires Durin, or the leaf, I should say, inspires Durin to try to save Elrond, and Disa just smiles at it. Then we get another wonderful scene where Durin and Elrond are down sort of digging for Mithril, and this was also great, where Elrond's like, I was faking during our fight earlier. I just wanted to spend more time with you, bro. And Durin's like, come on, man, that's bull. That's bull. It's like, you didn't do that. It was just very fun. And then Durin's being like, we tell our best friends and lovers and brothers our true name. And I'm like, oh my God, just kiss already, you two. I mean, clearly, they're going for brotherly love in the show, but my little shipper heart's just sitting here going like, oh my God, kiss. I thought that was a really sweet scene. And then they find this vein of mithril, and Durin's father's like, nah, no, you can't have this. And turns out that he might actually be right. We'll see in a second. But then we have a good argument between the Durins, where young Durin has that wonderful line that I spoke about before, and older Durin sort of disowns him. Again, just a very powerful scene. I think it would have worked better if we had gotten a little bit more of the king throughout the season and their relationship, but overall I think it works well enough for what we've seen of the two of them and their relationship so far, that is loving, that is caring, but they have tensions between the two of them. I like that nuance, that it's not like the king's an asshole. Outright, he cares for his son, and there's depth to their relationship, but they miss each other in the dark sometimes. And so I really do think that scene worked very well. But then we get Disa being all like fired up. It's like, we're gonna be king and queen one day, and we're gonna save your friend. We're gonna make it happen. Your father's old. He doesn't understand things. So I did like that scene. But then we get one final beat with this, which is we see inside the mithril vein and the leaf lands, and we see the Balrog, probably the Balrog that we know from Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, awakening. Not entirely sure. I mean, I guess we've already seen the Balrog, so it's, if you hide it, it's like we already know what it looks like. I feel like showing us that creature right then, I think I would have liked it to be a little less like overt, and like maybe that's just my feeling on it, to just like see the hand of fire light up or something like that, or like the eyes glowing in the dark instead of us seeing the Balrog roar or whatever. But it was cool overall. I just think playing your cards a little bit closer to the vest, even though we all know it would be the Balrog, I think it would have been cooler to have a little bit of tension there. But that is me. You may differ on that. Otherwise, it is still cool to know that we got a Balrog coming, because we do know that Khazad-dûm, things don't go good, let's just say, for them. So yeah, that's all. I think that's everything I had to say. I spoke for 23 minutes about this episode. Did not expect that. I think there was just so much to discuss. This was, again, I talked myself into this. I really did like this episode quite a lot. Not perfect, still have issues, but strongest episode so far. I'm going to wrap out there because I've already gone for a very long time, but I will say this one last thing, just to ask all of you, if you've made it this far, might as well. I will be very honest and tell all of you that just specifically this show, but a lot of shows, just due to the YouTube algorithm, as we all know, some of these shows have been put up in that culture war fight of like, it's the SJW show, woke scolds, only woke people like the Lord of the Rings, oh my God, there's a black dwarf in it, oh, we should all like yell and scream. And so I get a lot of that like toxicity around this show in the comments. And again, if you don't like this show, that is fine. Totally cool. And I appreciate you listening to everything that I have to say, despite you probably disagreeing with me or disliking this show. But I will say it does suck quite a lot to get comments from people that are just hating on the show, and also sometimes call me dumb and hate on me for liking this show or enjoying it or trying to even have a nuanced discussion. And as I always try to do on this channel, I always try to say, like, these are my opinions right now. I love discussing stuff because you all can change my opinions. Like, I cannot tell you how many times my opinions have changed or evolved or grown because of the wonderful discussions that I have in the comment sections with people around this show. And I really want to encourage that. So please, even if you're just watching, and I'm not trying to do this for engagement, like, legitimately, I don't need this channel to make money. Like, I do this channel for fun. I don't get much money from this one. I get pennies from this channel. My channel's money I get is from Patreon and my main channel. So I don't need to do this. I do this because I love it. And the joy kind of gets taken away when a lot of toxic people come in and yell about woke stuff or get angry or even just start kind of mean to me, even if they do have nuanced criticism sometimes. So basically what I'm asking is, if you want to have a discussion, please leave a comment. I want to hear your thoughts, even if you disagree, especially if you disagree with me. But let's have fun with this. Let's talk about this together and just enjoy the conversation, even if you disagree. And even if not, just please leave a nice comment. It does mean a lot. I cannot tell you, as someone who reads all of my comments, I read every single one. It does mean a lot to see a nice comment, even if it's just like, thank you, Jessie, or something like that. I'm not digging for the thank yous. I just more am like, I need positivity. I guess that's more what I'm saying. I need positivity. I don't necessarily need compliments. I just need positivity, because that's not always the case in comment sections, especially when the algorithm turns in terrible people to you. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you for being wonderful. Thank you for being a caring community. I adore you all. And I will see you next week for the final episode of this season. Until then, live long and prosper, my friends.